I tried to write the top 10 list of the worst things my mother ever did to me, but I ended up with like 18, I think. And I don't know which ones to cut, so I'm going to do them all. Fuck convention. I'm not following any of that stuff anyway. I mean, I say fuck enough. You know I'm not monetizing this channel, so I guess there's no need to do a clickbaity top 10 list. And I'm not going to count down either. I'm going to do them chronologically, as best as I can remember anyway. Early childhood is a bit of a confusing timeline in my head. And though I think I remember the actual events very clearly, the order they happened in is I'm not sure exactly, but I'll do my best to do the list chronologically. Except except for the last one. I will leave the worst one for last. The one I've never told anyone about. I will probably put that off as long as I can. I was in nursery school for a year or so around age 3, but then the next year I wasn't old enough for kindergarten yet, not in my town anyway. So she used my uncle's address to enroll me. That meant that almost no one I knew could know where I lived, and I had to lie about it, just so she could get me into government daycare a year early. That meant I only got to hang out with my friends if my mother felt like driving me somewhere. And my mother was lazy as fuck. Sometimes she would wake up in the morning and not want to do something that she said she would do, like take me to an event. She wouldn't even get out of bed. She would just tell me that I couldn't go because I was being punished for something she just remembered I did yesterday. And then she would roll over and go back to sleep. From about 3 years old, I think, to 10 years old, I lived in a 1-bedroom apartment with my mother. I'm going to call this the Elm Street era. Until I was 9, there were bars on my side of our shared bed to prevent me from falling out. I never gave her any reason to think that I would fall out of bed. I don't think I ever fell out of bed. I may have climbed out of my crib as a baby, but I can't validate that story. Anyway, it was like a cage, trapped between her and those bars. Having to sleep in the same bed as someone who terrorizes you is awful, as I'm sure a lot of people unfortunately understand, though it is usually a partner, not a parent. So when I was 9, I went on vacation with her and my adult sister, and since I didn't fall out of bed the entire time, my sister and I were able to successfully plead the case for removing the bars. We lived in a 1-bedroom apartment because my mother was lazy. She took a greedy instant payout when she divorced my father when I was 1.5, and a small monthly payment. She spent all the money really quickly, and much later, after she kicked me out, she kept the monthly payments too. My father had no way of knowing about this because I wasn't speaking to him at that point. Right, so my mother was really lazy. She could have probably been a professional bowler, but she said it sounded like too much work. She would do anything to avoid work. She repeatedly committed fraud, mostly unemployment fraud. These were the worst times for me because she was home all the time. One time at a deli she worked at, she pretended to drop a ham on herself and claimed she injured her back. I'm pretty sure much later, when I was an adult, I think she lit her car on fire. So yeah, great role model. I often worry that I'm so committed to the truth because I'm just rebelling against who she was. But that's a whole can of philosophy I can open some other time. So which one of these things is on the list? I'm gonna go with the bars. The rest are too broad. And I really hated those bars. Side note about my dad, and he really was just a side note in all of this. When I was a kid, I didn't cut my dad any slack. I had to deal with my mother. I didn't have to deal with him. Now that I'm an adult, I cut him all the slack, just because he wasn't as bad as her. But he wasn't great. He left me as a baby with a woman who couldn't even hold me when I cried. You might think that that was undiagnosed postpartum depression, but if it was, it lasted until I was in my 20s. And later, when I was 15, I went to him for help and he didn't give it to me. Now I'm in a situation where I am trying to care for someone who didn't take care of me. And I know, it's hard to get custody when you're a man, especially back then, but he left the country. My mom also told me not to take any shit from him. She hated him, and she tried her best to poison me against him. She also told me he wasn't allowed to hit me. Not that I think he ever would have, I don't know. Later, when I was an adult and I was talking to my father again, he would ask me about my mother and why I wasn't talking to her. Like, every time I saw him, I'd be like, you literally just called her Hitler. Why do you think it is important that I talk to her? Stop bringing her up. But he wouldn't stop for years. People can be so irrational about family relationships. Anyway. She forced me to get my long hair cut off while I cried. I was at an age where I could wash my own hair, but when my sister started washing her own hair like 15 years earlier, supposedly she didn't do it properly, she couldn't get all the shampoo out of her long hair and ended up with a clump of dandruff in it or something. She called it dandruff, but I don't think shampoo residue causes dandruff, and I don't think it clumps, so it was probably something else, if it was even real. Anyway, that's what she told me, and that's why she said I had to have my hair cut off. And she had it cut off really short, and I was so sad and mad, and I was bawling throughout the whole thing. And the hairdresser just kept going. I guess I should have been grateful, because when she was washing my hair, every time she would wrap my hair in a towel and wring it so tight it would always hurt. And when I complained, she would say, "Beauty must suffer." She said that a lot. It wasn't really for beauty, obviously, because now I have a weird hairline with some patches of really sparse hair that may or may not have been caused by that. I should look at some early pictures. But every time I see myself in a picture with that haircut, I'm angry all over again. Like physical abuse, this kind of treatment teaches kids that their bodies don't belong to them. I mean, I guess this is a kind of physical abuse. She literally was cutting away a part of me, even if it was a part with no feelings. But I had feelings, and she treated me like my feelings didn't matter. She always did. She was willing to hurt me just to make things a little bit more convenient for her. I was at a doctor's appointment with my mother. I'm not sure how old I was, but I was at the age where I had been taking my temperature orally for a couple of years. But for some reason, some power trip my mother and the doctor were having, they wanted me to take it rectally. I didn't want to. There was no good reason for it, and I said so. They told me it was more accurate. The doctor told me he takes his 16-year-old daughter's temperature rectally, which at the time I thought was just a ploy to make me think that, big kids get their temperature taken like that too. But thinking back on it later, I thought, that's fucking disgusting. And I wish I had said so at the time. I don't remember what they did to actually make me relent, but I remember they bullied me until I did it. I remember being so embarrassed. And when we left the appointment, she told my uncle, who had been waiting in the car, she told him how brave I was for taking it up the ass. And at that point, I just wanted to die. We were on vacation at the beach with my uncle, who was the best. He was one of the best human beings I've ever known, and this is absolutely not his fault. I was getting chronic nosebleeds. I don't know why, but one happened while I was in the shower. And my mom made me stand there with the blood running like all the way down my stomach so she could show my uncle. I remember it like so vividly, like how my stomach was kind of distended, in the way that little kids' stomachs are sometimes, and the blood was just like running over it. But I had to just stand there naked and bleeding and now crying because my uncle was seeing me like this and I was being treated like an object. In 1867, New Jersey became the first state to abolish corporal punishment in public schools. Why is this relevant? Because when I was in 3rd grade or thereabouts, my mother brought me in for a meeting with my teacher, and she explained to me that if I misbehaved, my teacher had her permission to hit me. I don't remember my teacher saying much, but she went along with it. She didn't deny it. I think she looked uncomfortable at least. I thought this was suspect, but, I didn't have Google at the time to fact check it. I don't know what made me angrier, that she might be lying to manipulate me, my mother, or that my teacher was going along with it, whether or not this could actually happen. This was a teacher I actually liked too, which made it so much worse. Whatever you think about public school for me at the time, it was a safe space where at least I was safe from my mother. Mostly, not counting the time she threw a book bag at me, though technically we were outside of the school, not inside. Anyway, she did this to make sure I felt that she was always with me. She wanted to make no space safe. You might be wondering what sort of things did I get up to that warranted a beating at school? Real or not? Was I rude? Was I disruptive? No. Did I get into fights? Sometimes, but that didn't warrant punishment. More on that later. The issue my mother wanted to correct was that sometimes I didn't finish my morning classwork because I was playing make-believe with the other kids in my group. The other straight-A students. Grade school. Elm Street era. I want to say 4th grade. I was in chorus, and we had practice really early in the morning, like before school early. My mother, wanting to seem great, offered to get up extra early and pick up all of my friends and drive us to practice every week. At some point, she realized that sucked, and she didn't want to do it anymore. But instead of just saying that or making an excuse and letting one of the other parents pick me up, she made me quit. And she made me lie and say I didn't want to do it anymore so she wouldn't look bad. Elm Street era, around 8 or 9, if I had to guess, maybe younger. We watched an afternoon special together about psychological abuse. She said, I do this. This is me. She knew what she was doing, but she never made any effort to change. As far as I could tell. She never changed anyway. Elm Street era. I don't really know how old I was. Maybe 8, 9. I was doing some writing homework, and I wasn't great about staying within the margins. So she sat by me, and she put her fucking finger on the margin so I couldn't write past it. And she made me do the whole assignment like that. I want to fucking scream. So the next day, I was doing some homework in my notebook, and every time I would make a mistake, I would rip the paper out of the notebook and start again. I don't remember if she was doing that the day before. I only remember the finger. She was like, what is wrong with you? And she looked at the papers and was like, what are you doing? This one is fine. Which just made me angrier. Like, why does she get to decide what is fine or not? Why doesn't my opinion about my own work matter? Like, I just exist to dance for her. Like, why do you get to decide what is good? I'll fucking decide what is good for myself. Thanks for the perfectionism, Mom. I hate my face because it isn't symmetrical. I hate my voice because I don't know, it sounds fucking stupid. And I hardly ever finish anything. Anything that means anything anyway. I'll finish this maybe. I got my first period when I was 10. My mother was away, and I was with my grandmother, and I didn't want to tell her, I guess because I thought it would have been embarrassing for her, and probably me. But I told my mother when she got home. She didn't believe me. I showed her my underwear. She said I must have put my underwear on backwards and shit myself. I have never shit myself. Shitted? Shat? Whatever. I've never shit myself or pissed myself or anything like that when I was a kid. Once when I was an adult, but that was after fasting for 2 days, eating a big meal, and accidentally taking a triple dose of probiotic chocolate. She might have remembered that right before she left, I had cramps so bad we were worried my appendix was going to burst. She didn't take me to a doctor. I think that's enough for today.